Okay, so um, have you ever felt like you're just stuck, in that daily grind, like a cog in a machine?
Totally. It's like you're just going through the motions day after day.
Exactly. And this book we're diving into today, Be a Free-Range Human, it really hits on that feeling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the author Marianne Cantwell, she calls it being a battery cage human.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of harsh, but also like too accurate, you know?
I can see that. So is this book like a guide to breaking free from that cage?
Exactly. Cantwell herself, she actually walked away from her corporate job to create the life she wanted.
For her.
Right. And now she's sharing those lessons, and it's all about this idea of a free-range career.
Free range career. Okay, I like the sound of that already, but what does that actually look like in real life?
Right. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
So for our listeners who are thinking, okay, but how do I actually do that? How would you explain the whole free-range thing?
Well, it's about having flexibility, low risk, and a lot of times being able to work from anywhere. You don't need a ton of money up front or some rigid business plan. Think of it like, remember in the book, Miss Cupcake?
Oh, right. The one who made vegan cupcakes.
Yes, she took her passion and turned it into a business, but on her own terms. That's a perfect example of free range in action.
And there's that guy, Benny, what's his name? He travels the world learning languages and somehow makes a living from it.
Benny Lewis, yes, he's another great example. He's literally designed his whole life around what he loves.
Exactly. And these are just two examples. The point is, you don't need to have it all figured out from day one. But I bet some people listening are like, okay, but how do we even figure out what my free range thing is?
Well, Cantwell talks about this too. Obviously, identifying your passions is key, but she also talks about tuning in to your internal GPS.
Okay, I love that metaphor. Tell me more about this internal GPS.
So it's about really paying attention to your gut feelings, you
Yeah.
know? When you're looking at different career options, do you get a yes feeling deep down or more of a no feeling?
Right. Like, does it feel exciting or does it feel draining?
Exactly. And learning to trust those instincts is so important.
Because it's so easy to get caught up in what we think we should be doing,
Mm.
you know, instead of what actually lights us up.
Absolutely. And another thing Cantwell points out is that you don't have to just have one passion, one thing you're good at. You can have multiple interests, different skills. She calls it a portfolio career.
Well, I like that. It's like having different pieces of who you are and finding ways to combine them.
Right. Like you could be a writer and a photographer, or a teacher and a coach, you know? It's about embracing those different sides of yourself.
I love that. It's so freeing. But I'm guessing some people, even if they love this whole free range concept, might still be hitting a wall of self-doubt. Like, what if I don't have enough experience? Or what if I fail? Any advice for dealing with that inner critic?
Oh, absolutely. Cantwell talks about this too. She actually has a whole chapter on facing your fears. And she doesn't say to ignore those feelings, but she talks about reframing them.
Okay, how do you reframe fear?
Well, she introduces this idea of an advantage case. It's like instead of focusing on what you don't have or what you haven't done, you focus on what you do have, the skills and experiences you've already gained.
I love that, flipping the script.
Yeah.
So instead of I don't have enough experience, it becomes
I have 10 years of experience in customer service, which means I'm amazing at communicating and problem solving.
yes. Exactly. It's about seeing those skills as valuable, even if they don't fit neatly into a traditional job description.
Hmm.
Speaking of which, she mentions a guy in the book, Robert, who went from being an engineer to coaching authors.
Robert Watson, yeah, I remember that. It seemed like such a random career change.
Right. Engineering to author coaching. But she explains how his engineering background actually gave him these amazing problem-solving skills and analytical thinking that he uses in his coaching practice.
Oh, I see. So it's not about throwing away your past experience. It's about finding those hidden strengths and using them in new ways.
Exactly.
Yeah, and sometimes the things that seem totally unrelated to your dream career can actually be your biggest assets.
It's all about perspective, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about reframing our fears, identifying our strengths,
Yeah.
but how do we actually take action? Like, how do you actually launch a free-range career?
So this is where Cantwell's idea of a prototype project comes in.
Mm.
And it's all about testing your ideas in the real world without taking a huge risk. Dipping your toes in the water before you dive in head first.
I like that. So instead of quitting your job and going all in on something you're not sure about, you start small and experiment.
Exactly. It's about gathering information, getting feedback, and then using that to refine your path as you go. And even if the initial experiment doesn't work out the way you hoped, you still gain valuable experience.
It's like that saying, fail fast, fail forward.
Exactly. And she has this great example in the book about a guy named Peter Shankman. He had this crazy idea to sell t-shirts that said, "It sank, get over it," when the movie Titanic came out on video.
Wait, really?
Yeah, he printed like 500 shirts, set up a table in Times Square, and sold out in a matter of hours.
No way. What happened next?
That little prototype project not only proved that there was a market for his idea, but it also got him a ton of media attention and helped him launch a successful online business.
See? Proof that sometimes the craziest ideas are the best ones. Okay, but what about Cantwell herself? Did she do a prototype project?
She did. Remember, she talks about wanting to be a geekpreneur.
Wait, she tried to open a bakery?
Not exactly. It was more like an event catering thing. And it turned out that while she loved the creative side of baking, the actual event planning and all that, not so much.
So her prototype project helped her realize that maybe a traditional bakery wasn't the right fit for her.
Exactly. And it allowed her to pivot and focus on the aspects of her passion that she truly enjoyed.
That's so important.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we have this idea of what we think we want, but it's not until we actually try it out in the real world that we realize, maybe this isn't for me after all. Okay, so let's say someone's done their prototype project, they're feeling good about their idea, and they're ready to go full free range.
Yeah.
How do they stand out from the crowd? Especially online, where there's so much noise and competition.
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Well, Cantwell is big on this idea that being you is your biggest asset.
Really?
Like, embracing what makes you unique, your quirks, your individual experiences, your story, that's what's going to attract the right people to you.
So not trying to be everything to everyone, but really owning your niche.
Exactly. She actually calls it the 1%, 100% model. It's this idea that those small 1% differences, those authentic details, can make a 100% impact on your success.
Because it's those little things that make you memorable, relatable, that help you connect with people on a deeper level.
Right. Exactly. And there's a great example of this in the book. Remember Grace, the life coach who specialized in burnout.
Yeah, she had 2 kids, right?
Right. And at first, she was targeting, anyone who was feeling burnt out. But then she niched down even further and started focusing specifically on moms in business who are struggling with burnout.
Ah, so she got super specific about who she served and what problems she solved.
Exactly. And that's when her business really took off.
Okay, so find your niche, be authentically you.
At it.
Got it. But even when you've done all that, how do you actually get those ideal clients to find you, especially online?
Well, Cantwell's a huge advocate for content marketing and building an email list.
Content marketing makes sense. Sharing valuable stuff online, showing off your expertise. But the email list thing always seemed kind of old school to me, Like with social media and everything, who even uses email anymore?
I know, right? But here's the thing. You don't own your social media audience.
Yeah.
Algorithms change, platforms come and go. But with an email list, you're building a direct connection with people who have actively chosen to hear from you.
So it's about having more control, not being at the mercy of some algorithm.
Exactly. And Cantwell's not talking about spamming people with sales pitches. It's about nurturing those relationships, sending valuable content, building trust over time.
Okay, so it's more like courting your audience than bombarding them.
I like that. That's a great way to put it. It's about showing up consistently, providing value, being genuine. And then when you do have something to offer, they're more receptive because they already know, and trust you.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but there's one more thing I want to touch on that I think a lot of people struggle with, especially when they're first starting out, and that's pricing.
Ah, yes. Pricing. How do you know what to charge? How do you make sure you're not undercharging or overcharging?
Exactly. It's such a tricky balance.
It is. Well, Cantwell is very clear on this point. She says that undercharging is a race to the bottom, meaning you're devaluing your work and ultimately hurting yourself and your business. Instead, she says, focus on the value you're providing, the transformation you're facilitating. Remember Philip, the photographer from the book?
Oh, yeah. The one who used to be a teacher. He had a really unique style.
He did, and he was so hesitant to raise his prices, even though he was in high demand. But he finally did, and guess what? He didn't lose a single client.
Get out, really.
Yeah, they totally understood his value and were happy to pay his worth. In fact, raising his prices actually allowed him to hire an assistant and expand his business.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so don't be afraid to charge what you're worth, people. But On that note, there's another thing that comes up a lot for people who are going out on their own, leaving that traditional job structure behind.
What's that?
Status. Like, how do you build credibility when you're not climbing that corporate ladder?
Ah, yeah, that's a big one. Cantwell actually has a whole section on this. It's called Zooming Up the Status Ladder.
Zooming up the status ladder? I like that. Okay, tell me more about this status ladder.
Okay, so she breaks it down into 3 steps. The first one is association.
Association.
Yeah.
Like networking who you know.
It's partly that, but it's also about leveraging your existing connections and experiences. Remember Helen from the book, The Hypnotherapist?
Yeah. What about her?
She was worried about starting a new career from scratch. Feeling like she had to prove herself all over again. But then she realized that her 10 years of experience working with big brands, even though it wasn't directly related to hypnotherapy, gave her instant credibility.
Because people already knew she was capable, trustworthy, professional, even if they didn't know anything about her hypnotherapy work.
Exactly. It's like having that track record that people can look at and say, okay, this person knows what they're doing.
Right. Okay, so that's association. What's the next step on the status ladder?
Publication.
So getting your work out there, building a portfolio.
Yes. Writing articles, doing interviews, maybe even self-publishing a book. Cantwell says that getting published, even on a small scale, can really boost your credibility.
It's like that saying, published is better than perfect. Right?
Exactly. And there's a great example of this in the book, too. Remember Kim, the travel writer?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Wasn't she featured in some big travel magazine or website?
Yeah, Lonely Planet. But it all started with her blog. She was just writing about her travel experiences, and then one of her articles got picked up by Lonely Planet, which led to her taking a writing course and eventually landing gigs with The Guardian.
Whoa. Talk about a snowball effect. Okay, so we've got association, publication. What's the third step on the status ladder?
Affiliation.
Like joining groups, finding your people.
Yes. Connecting with other experts and thought leaders in your field, attending events, joining professional organizations.
Basically putting yourself out there and becoming part of the conversation in your industry.
Exactly. And, it doesn't even have to be about formal mentorship or anything like that. Cantwell talks about this woman, Jenny, who literally wrote down the name of one of her heroes in an exercise about who she wanted to be associated with.
Okay, I love where this is going.
And get this. A year later, that very person recognized her at an event.
What? No way.
Yes, they'd seen her work online. They were familiar with her name. It's like she manifested it.
That's so cool. Okay, so we're putting it out there into the universe, doing the work and making those connections. It's all connected.
It is. And, as we wrap up this deep dive into be a free-range human, I think that's a really powerful message. It's not just about quitting your job and becoming a digital nomad, although that's definitely a possibility for some people. It's really about shifting your mindset from I can't to how can I, from feeling stuck to feeling empowered.
Yes. And remembering that it's a journey, not a race. There's no one right way to be free range. It's about finding what works for you and designing a life that you love.
Exactly. And it all starts with taking that first step, even if it's just reading the book or starting a prototype project.
And don't forget those 5 lessons from Cantwell's mom. They're basically free range commandments.
They really are.
This book was so inspiring, and I know our listeners are going to get a ton out of it.
Me too. It's practical, it's funny, and it's packed with real-life stories that show you it is possible to create a life you love on your own terms.
That's it for this deep dive. Now go out there and get a little more free range in your life.